This is Ugo Baldi from Italy, and I will be showing you in this clip a seminar given by Anastassia Makarieva, a Russian researcher from St. Petersburg, whom you see here in this picture, together with her co-worker Viktor Gorshkov. They were the developers of some important concepts in ecological science, mainly the concept of the biotic pump and the concept of biotic regulation. They are both about how the ecosystem, Earth's ecosystem, self-regulates in absence of strong perturbations like the ones we are inflicting on it right now, which is one of the problems we have. So Anastasia was in Italy for a few days. She came to visit me, and we didn't have the time to organize for her a formal seminar, so we limited ourselves to something more informal, simple, a seminar she gave at home, at my home, for some friends, for the sheer pleasure of doing science, which is something important, I think, to like science, not to be too formal, to appreciate science for what it is, for how it can enrich us, it can make us better. And so in the following, you will find this talk by Anastasia about the hydrological cycle in Earth that I hope you will find it interesting. It is not all of it, it was more than 1 hour when she gave it, it's half an hour, the central part. And so thank you very much for your attention, and I leave you with Anastasia.
And this was associated with the decline of cloud cover over the Amazon and more sunshine absorbed. So here you have this picture like all together, and these are, you can see that these are plant stomata. So if we look at the leaf through microscope, we will see these small holes through which water vapor goes up. So, and now we look at the major routes of moisture, how it travels over the world. And here you can see the main forests and the main routes of how winds blow. So we have these trade winds here and preferential movement from east to west, and in the more northern areas the direction is reversed. And if we look at precipitation distribution in forested and unforested regions, what do we see? We see that in unforested regions, precipitation drops exponentially as we move inland. So it doesn't penetrate, it is like these unforested regions are locked for moisture, so it can't penetrate. Meanwhile, in forested regions, you can see that precipitation remains uniform over thousands of kilometers. So we can see this like in motion. And here you can see precipitation distribution over these 7,000 kilometers. So if we return to this, over this boreal forest belt, this big one, 7,000 kilometers. So you can see that in winter, so this is ocean and this is forest. So we can see that in summer we have this uniform distribution and less rain over the ocean than over the land. So the forest in summer draws moisture to land. Meanwhile, when the forest is dormant, we have all rain over the ocean and little precipitation on land, and it declines from west to east. So Siberia gets very little snow, and its climate is very like harsh, what we call continental climate. And here you can see, so these are the Amazon forest, Congo forest, and also precipitation related to oceanic precipitation. And we can compare. These are different months. We can compare forested regions where there is always more precipitation than over the ocean. And this is deforested Australia. And we can see that in the wet season and in the dry season, there is always a decline of moisture inland. So the biotic pump doesn't work there. And so it works in the Amazon, and here you can see this is how air circulation works. So this is our globe, and these are cells. So the air rises at the equator and descends over the 30th latitude, and you can see that there is a peak of precipitation. This is latitude, and this is equator, and you can see that there is a peak of precipitation near the equator, and this peak travels to the north and south following the sun. But in the Amazon, and it brings rain to different regions. But in the Amazon forest, it turns out it makes its own rain itself. So the wet season begins 2 months in advance of the arrival of this purely geophysical rain. So, and Australia, if we look, this is an important also line of evidence. Australia used to be a green continent as early as 50 or 40,000 years ago, before the arrival of first humans. And now their archaeologists are excavating 3 kangaroos, which only live in wet forests. So now in the Australian desert, they are finding these remnants of such animals. And doing isotopic analysis, they on Lake Erie, which used to be like a big lake, they found that there was a change in the isotopic composition of various remnants of plants and animals, which indicate that approximately when there was arrival of humans 40,000 years ago, there was a drastic change in the hydrological regime. And this has no explanation because there were no major drivers of climate change at that time. For example, now we can see we have CO2 emissions, and this is a major global driver. We can ascribe everything to, but at that time there were no such thing. And what happened that when they arrived, they lived on the coast and they made fires because they hunted animals. They tried to facilitate hunting with fire, and then they cut the inner forest from the ocean. So by destroying forest on the shore, they cut the biotic pump, and the inner forest couldn't get its moisture, and so the whole continent became a desert. And it shows that it is not only the number of people that matters, because they were very few compared to us, but how we think and how we understand nature, that it is a homeostatic system which can absorb our disturbances, like our organism, up to a certain limit. So, and it will react to these disturbances and still be healthy. But if we go beyond this limit, it can totally disintegrate. And so our primary task is to understand this limit and to go down with our impact on the biosphere to the green corridor where the nature is still homeostatic. So here I want to show you. So as these are. So what is new here? The new thing in the biotic pump is that we identified a mechanism how the forest does it. So how moistening of the atmosphere leads to wind blowing from the ocean to land. And this is related to the pressure drop from condensation, which I will now show you. Just that you have an idea. So suppose we have very hot water and very hot, and pour it into the bottle. So the bottle now warms to almost 100 degrees. It is like boiling water, or 90 degrees. So now we have wet bottle, very, very hot. Now we will remove the water from the bottle such that we only have water vapor inside, okay? Inside a very hot bottle. Okay, now we seal this bottle with such that there is also only a narrow tube, and we do like this and put it into water. This is just colored water. What happens? The bottle begins to cool, right? It is very hot, and water vapor inside condenses, and we see a drop of pressure which draws fluid in. So basically, this is like an illustration of what happens when forest moistens the atmosphere, then there rises and there is condensation, there is drop of pressure at the surface, and there is like this drop of pressure is what creates the inland moisture flow. Of course, this type of qualitative illustration is not enough to publish a scientific paper, so our main why we, despite these considerations, are considered like radically new, like fundamentally new. This is what our critics admit that. What makes us still go forward is that we provided quantitative estimates of how important this effect is in our real atmosphere. So we have a theory that relates condensation to wind power, and we can test it with the data. And when we tested, it matched. So in several, so this is, I will just skip. There are also hurricanes. So we can study this effect physically in hurricanes, because there is a lot of condensation and they are many. So you have a good statistic and can do quantitative analysis. So part of our work was published about tropical cyclones and quantifying it as a toy model for the biotic pump in forests. So now I want just to say a few words about implications. So what it matters when we disrupt the system, how it matters. So this is not only our research, but other people also came to similar conclusions, even though they didn't. They used another lines of argument. But look here. So when this is how the biotic pump works. So we have moist air coming to land, rising and descending over land. Now suppose we destroy the forest. So now the land is dry, but as it is dry, it is also very hot. Like you know that water surface is always colder than sand, heated by the sun. So this warm air rises, but it can't rise very high, and so all moisture that remains here and evaporates will be blown away from land. So by tipping the circulation from this to this, we will be blowing moisture out from land and desertifying land. So, and this is a delicate tipping point that may occur quite unexpectedly. And so, for example, one example which we just saw with our own eyes is Rhodos. Rhodos, Greek island. So it used to be covered by forests, but with the development of olive planting, and also when you disrupt hydrology, it affects the remaining ecosystem also. So ultimately the forests began to degrade, and even though this is a small island heated by the sun, so it is warm and the air should rise and it should rain, could rain, but they now the hydrological cycle was totally disrupted, and they had to build an artificial lake for collecting water, even though before, so you can see, they had these rivers flowing year round. Now it doesn't happen. They have like soil erosion, and so it is now, it is what called a dry landscape trap. So when this land goes into the state, it is very difficult to get out. So there are returning to the question what usual normal people can do, and always we can hear that let us go and plant trees. But if we don't keep this complex system in mind, what can happen? If we go and plant trees in a very dry region, which is already trapped in this dry state, these trees will transpire, they will moisten the atmosphere, but still, as the atmosphere is very dry, it won't be enough for condensation to occur. And so all this moisture will be blown away by winds. So it will be just a waste of soil moisture. So just planting trees, especially in dry conditions, it is not a good idea. So we need to respect the ecosystem rules, how it restores itself. Meanwhile, if we restore natural forest, which is evolutionary adapted to local regional conditions, it will do the right thing. So this transpiration can be compared to a wise investment. So the forest has a certain capital, soil moisture. It transpires it through leaves, moistens the atmosphere. But it should do it wisely, such that condensation occurs, there is rainfall, there is pressure drop, and it receives more than it invested from the ocean, such that it can compensate the gravitational loss of water. Meanwhile, if we just plant trees under dry conditions, so this investment is just lost and nothing happens. So this dry condition was independently, like these two states with tipping points that connect them, was independently discovered by Australian scientists who termed this, as I said, landscape trap. And this also shows that if we have a natural forest which we don't cut and don't burn, it has like a high resilience to fire and to drought. So, but if we destroy the forest and it becomes much more vulnerable to drought and can ultimately just degrade. And so when people think about of how forests influence water cycle, it is like a blind man exploring what is an elephant, and one thinks that it is a rope, another thinks that it is like a wall. So if we don't take into account these two regimes, there is a lot of confusion and people don't understand each other. So we need to keep this in mind all the time. So when we have a very degraded environment, like in many southern regions of Europe now, the first thing that we should do is to keep moisture in the landscape. So when we have a degraded soil, what we do, we make change the landscape such that more water remains in the landscape. So, and here you can see just such that you have a visual idea of how forests, even that are very far from each other, they are very similar in terms of how they moisten the atmosphere. So this is a tropical forest in Papua New Guinea, and you can see that these local areas of condensation occur spontaneously because the atmosphere is really very, very wet. And this is a Russian forest in Prisursky Nature Reserve, and you can see almost the same picture. So these forests are very creation of evolution, which master a very complicated process, hydrological cycle. So respecting their structure and function is the only way that we can guarantee certain stability for our hydrological cycle.
That was rain, in the Prisus forest?
It is not rain because it is still like
Still moisture.
no. It is like fog, still fog, which is very, very small droplets that are so small that they almost don't fall down. So, but this condition is unstable, and for example, when sun comes, so there will be motion, there will be rain, and real rain, and with incoming air and so forth. So, and this is what happens when the forest is disturbed beyond threshold. This is a forest in Germany, where I also work in Technical University of Munich. So this is what happened. I will show you now. You see, this is the Czech Austrian German border. There is a point where they all meet. And you can see this is more than 100 years ago. Gentlemen, and you can see this forest, and they were establishing then what they called sustainable forestry. Sustainable forestry means that you take as much as forestry grows, which sounds like a good thing. But the problem is that in a natural forest, there is no regrowth, because it doesn't grow, it is stable. When a tree dies, another one grows, and the biomass is stable. So there is nothing to take from a natural forest. Everything is used there by those organisms who live there, and they all work to stabilize the climate. So you can only take as much as it regrows when you first cut everything, then it begins to regrow, and at a certain point you say, okay, it grows, say, so many tons of carbon per year, I will be taking that much. And so they maximize it. They stop it at the time when the production is maximum. This is what the sustainable forestry is about. You destroy the forest, then you begin to grow it, and at a certain point, when the rate of biomass production is maximum, you begin to take again at the same rate. But it is like, the forest has a natural process of recovery, which is called succession. Like when we are sick, our organism has certain mechanism how to help us to heal. And if we don't allow the organism to heal, so we stop it at a certain point. And for example, by continuously adding viruses, what will happen? It will fight for some time, but then it will break down. And so these people who thought that they are arranging like a sustainable forestry actually put a time bomb which took 100 years, which is a less than lifespan of a single tree, to become this thing. Because this was what happened due to bug beetle and due to other calamities, and accelerated by global warming. So, and here you can see just a thermovision picture of what happens when we cut the forest. So here you can see that this is what we were taking ourselves in this forest. So you can see it is a September day, so not very hot, but you can see that this log, which is under full sunshine, has a radiative temperature like of almost 50 or so it is very hot. So when we do this and disrupt the forest cover, we also increase flammability and we welcome fires. So, which then is convenient to blame to global warming. So, global warming has become for those people, for example in Russia, who cut, then all types of disaster follow, like fires. And then people say, well, we can't do anything because it is global warming. So global warming became an excuse for local wrongdoing. This is not emphasized often, but this is very true and very dangerous. Because global warming has its own danger. And we know from UGA that the rising CO2 is really bad for our cognitive ability and maybe for health. And this should be like fought with. But this shouldn't be an excuse for doing wrong things to our ecosystems. So this should be exposed and like fought with. And so here you can see European forests, and you can see that there are no basically unmanaged forests exist only in small areas in the very north of Europe. All forests are managed to one degree or another, especially like in Scandinavia and also in the in southern Europe. So when we hear there are forest fires or wildfires in Portugal, people think, oh, something grows there and burns because of global warming. But this is not so. There are highly disturbed, exploited ecosystems that can't stabilize their hydrology, and they burn just because they are overexploited. Meanwhile, for Portugal, which does have very small natural forests, and there are publications showing that these small but natural forests can stop a fire. So because they are moist, they keep moisture, so the fire goes, but if there is forest on its way, it doesn't pass further. So wildfires are not fires of the wild nature. These are fires that affect highly disturbed ecosystems. And the more natural forests we have, the less problems with hydrology we get. So this is just for you, this is not maybe... so this is a natural forest, like in Siberia, and this is an early successional forests, and they have very different function. Like I was showing this to Italian architects. I compared, like this is the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, created by very great architect. And this is like a shabby house. So these are different, they have different function. This and this forest, totally different hydrology, totally different impact on the cloud cover. So in a nutshell, that is what all I wanted to tell. So if there are questions, we can discuss.
Beautiful. Well.